Hi everybody! This is the first video I've written and shot in 2023, and I'm excited for the upcoming year in US stamps. The Postal Service has already announced a lot of the designs they'll be releasing. I especially like the Life Magnified set due out in August. I've been pulling for the Acorn Barnacle to get a stamp for a while now. A big personal change since shooting my last video is that I got married. Planning a wedding takes a lot of work, but it turns out that there's a small overlap there with stamps because you end up doing a lot of mailing. There's save the dates and invitations. It's the first time I took a close look at the Love series of stamps, which have gotten new designs regularly since the 1980s. This year's have these cartoon cat and dog. We ended up using a lot of the King and Queen ones from 2009 and the airplane skywriting ones from 2017. But this video isn't about the Love stamps, although maybe I'll do one someday. Something that came up when Googling around about wedding invitations was the possibility of needing additional postage even if they weighed less than 1 ounce. In fact, the greeting card industry is involved here. This added postage was a common enough issue for them to want to partner with the Postal Service to promote a series of stamps starting in 2010 featuring images of butterflies. So let's take a look at this series, now in its 8th design, and when you might need to use it. This is the Non-Machineable Surcharge stamp. So what exactly does it mean to be non-machinable? Wait, non-machinable? So Microsoft Word spell check will tell you not to use an E there, and when the Postal Service changes the rules for the surcharge and prints them up in the Federal Register, they even don't use the E, but there it is, on the stamp. Both are considered legal words to use in Scrabble, so I guess either one works. Anyway, I think it's common knowledge that there's a lot of automation involved in the mail system. Even though we're at half the peak of volume from 20 years ago, the Postal Service still handles 50 billion pieces of first-class mail a year, and that's just not going to happen manually. As good as the system is at dealing with different types of mail pieces, there are still requirements that need to be met, or else they just can't be handled by the machines involved. With that said, machines are getting smarter every day. At a certain point, it won't be a problem anymore. The machines will take over, and we won't be allowed to send mail at all. So what makes a piece of mail non-machinable? Well, let's limit ourselves to first-class mail under 1 ounce, since that's where the butterfly stamp would come into play. There are minimum and maximum dimensions to be considered a first-class letter, machinability aside. 3.5 inches high, 5 inches long, and 7/1000ths of an inch thick are the minimum dimensions, and 6 1/8 inches high, 11.5 inches long, and 1/4 inch thick are the maximum dimensions. But not everything in those bounds is considered machinable. Even though 7/1000ths of an inch is the minimum thickness, most letters under 9/1000ths of an inch are going to be non-machinable, unless they're on the small end of the height and width dimensions. To give you an idea though, most envelopes you buy at a store are thick enough to be machinable by themselves. If you're a character in a tragic romance novel about forbidden love, cheer up. You can mail a whisper with standard postage. Stamp man. Nice. Moving on, the aspect ratio matters, or the length of the letter divided by the height. If that ratio is less than 1.3, you need the butterfly stamp. A common example of this would be something like a square greeting card, where that ratio would be 1. You also need a butterfly stamp if that ratio is larger than 2.5. It's important to note what determines the length versus the height of a letter. It's actually based on how you write the address. Whatever direction you choose, that's your length. So if you take a standard envelope and write your address the short way, well, this is your length and this is your height. And now your aspect ratio is less than 1, so you need the non-machinable surcharge. There's also an assumption that your letter is roughly even in thickness. If you add something to your envelope to throw that off, like change or a key or a pen or whatever, then you're supposed to add the surcharge. In the same way, if you get fancy with how your envelope is closed, like with a thick clasp or a button or something, like I said, I saw this a lot with wedding invitations, again, you're supposed to use the butterfly stamp. Finally, there's the assumption that your letter is made of paper, more or less. There is some leeway here, but the outside of your letter can't be plastic, and the letter as a whole can't be rigid. It has to be able to bend. This is another good reason to not put something like a key in your envelope. There's a chance that the machinery is just going to rip it out going around a bend. Again, if any of this is a problem, use the butterfly stamp. With the discussion of when to use this stamp behind us, we can talk a little bit about its history. Now, the non-machinable surcharge is not new, even if the butterfly stamps are only 12 or 13 years old. And machines to automate some part of the postal system are almost 150 years old at this point. if we look at the first machines to cancel stamps. Something approaching modern sorting machines began to appear in post offices in the late 1950s and early 1960s, and is part of the reason why zip codes were introduced in 1963. This isn't a channel about postal service history, but I have to say, it was crazy how these systems used to work. The old version of hand sorting into cubbyholes seems like a logistical nightmare, but kind of understandable given technology. But even the semi-automated versions starting in the 60s required a person to look at each piece of mail and key in the destination. There was no optical character recognition. As technology continued to automate more of the process, the Postal Rate Commission recognized the need to define what could be easily handled by the machines and what couldn't, and to add an extra fee for first-class mail that needed to be processed outside of the system. The first surcharge, introduced in 1979, was set at 7 cents. Now, there weren't always stamps available at the exact combination of the first-class rate plus the surcharge. We did get a couple of nice ones shortly before the butterfly stamps were introduced. One was this dragonfly stamp in 2008, worth 62 cents, and this 2009 stamp of a dolphin, worth 64 cents. But in 2010, we got the first of the butterfly stamps, this one of a monarch butterfly, also worth 64 cents. Like I mentioned in the introduction, this was partly an effort by the Greeting Card Association, who still brags about it on their site today. Weirdly enough, this was actually the third time a monarch butterfly appeared on a stamp. Once was on the Insects and Spiders Classics collection release I mentioned in a previous video, and earlier than that, in 1987, we had one as part of the North American Wildlife Sheet. And actually since then, we got another 3 as part of the 2017 Protect Pollinators set. Someone at the Postal Service really loves monarch butterflies, apparently. Anyway, we got new butterfly releases each time the rates changed, and each one with a species that sounds more made up than the last one. In 2012, we got the 65-cent Baltimore checker spot butterfly. In 2013, the 66-cent spicebush swallowtail. And in 2014, the 70-cent Great Spangled Fritillary butterfly. Starting in 2015, though, the butterfly stamps became forever stamps, just like all standard first-class stamps are today. If the price of a first-class letter plus the surcharge changed, the stamps would still work without needing make-up postage. The Eastern Tiger Swallowtail stamp has the text of non-machinable surcharge underneath it instead of a cent value. You can still use these today. The next year, in 2016, we got the Eastern Tailed Blue butterfly. But then we had a bit of a wait. The Postal Service actually announced their next design at the end of 2016, the California Dog-Faced Butterfly, with the intention of a 2017 release. But they chose to sit on them for a couple of years until the stock of previous stamps had run low. That's one of the benefits of non-denominated postage, a benefit I talk about in another previous video. The current stamp in the series was introduced in 2021 and has the Colorado Hair Streak butterfly. There hasn't been a new one mentioned in any of the 2023 announcements yet, so it looks like it'll be a little while till the next one. Looking at the series as a whole, all of the butterfly stamps have been directed and designed by Derry Noyes, with art from Tom Engemann. Noyes has been one of the regular art directors for the Postal Service for decades now, so she's had her hand in hundreds of stamps over the years. Just last year, she was in charge of the Title IX stamps, the James Webb Telescope stamp, and the Snowy Beauty booklet, among others. Tom Engemann has also been working with the Postal Service for a long time as an artist. His 2 most notable projects might be the very first Forever stamp, the Liberty Bell design, and the 60 stamp 5-year Flags of Our Nation series, which I mentioned in passing in my first video, and since then have purchased a set of. One of Engemann's hallmarks is taking real images and abstracting them slightly, like his stamp for the National World War II Memorial or the background of his Puerto Rico stamp. This is also the case with the non-machinable stamps. From a distance, these might look like photographs of mounted butterflies, but zoom in and you can see that they're more stylized depictions of the insects. One notable aspect of the non-machinable surcharge is how much it's increased, and just recently. I was looking at blog posts on wedding planning sites from 2 years ago advising people to add 20 cents for the surcharge, and they weren't wrong at the time. Going back as far as 1985, the rate was 10 cents, so there hadn't been all that much movement in 35 years. In August 2021, though, the rate jumped from 20 cents to 30 cents, and last July it jumped again to 39 cents. By the time this video is posted, it'll be 40 cents. Clearly, there must have been a thought at the Postal Service that this surcharge was being undervalued, given that it's doubled in just the past 2 years. So hopefully that explains what's going on with these butterfly stamps. One last thing to mention is that even if you do use the butterfly stamps, don't put your non-machinable letters into a normal mailbox. Drop them off at the counter at your local post office, or else they just won't know to deal with it by hand. But I should probably get working on wedding thank you cards. I've been putting those off while I've been sidetracked by stamps. Although those will need postage too. Thank you for watching. Thanks again. If you enjoyed this video, check out some of the other ones I've made. I said in the introduction that this video was about butterfly stamps and not love stamps, but there has been a love stamp with a butterfly on it, one from 2011, designed by Derry Noyes.